Welcome to Journey to Joy Live, a podcast to promote wellness, resilience, and inspire joy. Be empowered to balance your mental, physical, financial, aspirational, and social health while providing mental health awareness and breaking down the stigma of mental illness in the Black community. I'm your host, Dr. If Joy, and I'm here to help you transform life's challenges into opportunities for joy. Let's begin the journey together. In episode 128, and we're talking about imposter syndrome, the lie that just steals our joy. And I have special guest, Dr. Lisa Orbé-Austin. She's a psychologist, executive coach, and imposter syndrome expert. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, thanks for coming. So tell us who you are. Well, we know who you are, but more about what you do and how you got into this field.
Yeah, so I'm a psychologist and executive coach for probably the last 20 years. And I've written 3 books on imposter syndrome. The first one was about how to overcome imposter syndrome. The second one was about cultures and organizations and what to think about within those around imposter syndrome triggering behaviors. And then the third one is about how to help your kids never develop imposter syndrome.
Oh,
yeah. So
I love it.
Yeah. And so I got into it because I actually experienced it myself. I had long lived with imposter syndrome. And I think it wasn't until I actually went through my doctoral program that I really started to realize it was actually a real thing. And I think it began to free me from this idea that something was deeply wrong with me and that I was constantly trying to have to prove myself. I didn't quite get over it in grad school, but I think one really intense experience, kind of in my postdoc years really changed everything for me and got me starting to write about it. And so that's what brought me into working on imposter syndrome for others.
Wow, makes sense. Usually it takes us going through it ourselves to be able to become that coach because we know how to overcome it. Now that you are the imposter syndrome coach, do you go through imposter syndrome still?
Sure. I mean, I think what I try to tell people is that it's an experience that's often triggered. You're not experiencing it all the time, but it's really about learning how to deal with those moments in which you're triggered so that you don't go down these spirals of behavior that really do steal your joy and do sometimes worse than that. And I think it's really, I still have the triggers. I still experience those moments, but I think I'm much better at getting myself back to a place where I have a grounded sense of what's happening in myself.
Yeah, it's so wild. I mean, where do you think it comes from? Because it happens to even the best of us. We have all the degrees, overachieving, and then we feel like we're an imposter. Like, why?
Well, it usually comes from childhood. That can't be terribly surprising. And the ways that success, achievement, our identities are tied to that. And often the ways people respond to our accomplishments or don't respond to our accomplishments kind of leaves us kind of believing that we, don't necessarily deserve these moments or have to work extra hard in order to achieve this, or whether or not we have the ability to internalize accomplishments as belonging to us or coming from our own kind of work. So it often comes from childhood relationships, family dynamics, experiences that you grow up with that are related to success, failure, achievement.
Yeah. And, it seems like it's also culturally too. I mean, have you noticed in your work where more so Black women are dealing with it or more so a certain race is dealing with it versus others? Have you noticed anything like that?
Yeah, so the research actually doesn't find any racial group differences. A lot of us who study it, and people don't understand this much, but most of us who study it are people of color nowadays. Some of the leading researchers are Black women, are Black men, women of color. We've been studying it for a while now. And we found there are not really significant racial differences. And actually for a while, we actually thought there were gender differences. And, then we kind of found out through the research that it generally seemed equivocal, like there weren't differences. And then recently a meta-analytic study came out suggesting that women do experience it slightly more. So in terms of race and gender, only that study came out like in 2024. So we see it as slightly more. It's not really massive. And also racial differences are very minor, which I think is really interesting because I do think there is an expectation that, or like an understanding that Black people, people of color, people in disenfranchised communities experience it more. But what I will say in terms of what we believe and what we've studied and seen is that when people of color and marginalized groups do experience it, they experience what we call the double impact of imposter syndrome. So that is when you believe that you have imposter syndrome, you feel like you're not like good enough, you're a fraud, and then the world is also telling you, well, maybe you aren't good enough. Maybe you don't belong here. Maybe you're not, maybe you got this from a special circumstance. And what that does is it reinforces the imposter syndrome, because we're getting external messages saying, I think your imposter syndrome is right. And that makes it much more difficult for us to overcome, because we're not getting alternative messages about our competence, about our capabilities, about what we can do with our lives. And so that makes it more difficult to overcome it. We don't have it in larger numbers, but the overcoming of it is more difficult because of the external consequences we're dealing with as a result of prejudice, bias, racism.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, all those things. Yeah, if you're already minoritized, it kind of feels like, well, I'm not supposed to be here. Why am I here? And then sometimes you're actually being told,
yes,
why are you here? Or if you went through, I know when I was in high school, the college admissions, what was it called? Affirmative action, right? They came down to my high school and they did on-spot admissions. Or if you were a part of affirmative action, like you're already told, like, oh, you shouldn't be here. So even if you get the degree, you feel like, oh, well, I'm an imposter. So then there's that on top of it.
Yeah, and those programs exist for a reason. They exist to give people give a fair playing ground when the playing ground has never been fair as a result of what's going on in this country. But I would also say that then there's been these kinds of stereotypes about that we didn't deserve to be there. So I remember my freshman year of college, I remember a bunch of girls showing up at my room, and I must have been there like a week or two, asking what my SAT score was. Like, what was your SAT score? And they were saying, we'll tell you ours, but what was yours? And they were very interested in mine and another girl on my floor who's Black, kind of SAT score. They weren't interested in everyone's. They were interested in the two of ours. And so I remember the scariness of that feeling, because there was a mass of them, this idea that you don't belong here. We're going to make it clear you don't belong here. And you're going to have to confess to us, what we already know about you, which is you don't belong here.
Exactly. It was always about the score, the numbers, and less about other things.
Standardized testing has bias. It's been proven a number of times, even in mathematical and spatial reasoning. It doesn't have to be just English and language. So we know that this exists, but we act as if it doesn't, as if SAT scores and these kinds of standardized testing is completely unbiased. It's not true.
Exactly. So for those of who might not realize it, what does imposter syndrome really look like and feel like in everyday life, especially for high achieving women?
Yeah, so it's this experience when you are competent, capable, experienced, credentialed, and yet you haven't internalized that. And as a result of not internalizing that, you tend to do one of two things. You tend to either overwork to overcompensate for this idea that you're not good enough, or you tend to self-sabotage. So you tend to engage in behaviors that put you up against the line, make it really difficult to feel like you've earned it. So you procrastinate and then try to get the thing done in the last minute. It makes you feel really stressed out, makes you feel like you don't really know what you're doing. And then typically we then also get into behaviors like kind of overvaluing others and devaluing ourselves. We can be very perfectionistic about sort of what is kind of achievement, what is the right type of achievement, how do we need to perform out in the real world. We can also be really harsh on ourselves around mistake making, very critical and self-flagellating about like a tiny mistake. We can often also have a really internally negative dialogue about the ways that we show up in the world. So it's this kind of like experience that where internally we are constantly criticizing ourselves, constantly don't feel like enough, and are overworking to perform to kind of get to that standard we believe is
constantly
is where we need to
look
be.
enough. Wow.
No.
Yeah. And you mentioned self-sabotaging. Is there the opposite where it's the people who have all the degrees, like they just don't feel like they're doing enough, so they keep getting degree after degree after degree?
I think, that's a really common phenomenon with imposter syndrome, because you feel like once you get that degree, you're gonna finally get over it, and then you get the degree and you don't get over it, and so then you're like, okay, then I need another certification, I need this, I need that, and you start to realize. I mean, hopefully, you get to the point where you realize, like, no degree, no certification, no nothing is going to make this go away unless you deal with it, because you see them with all the, I know when it's coming when I see all the credentials and all that, because it's just a matter of covering up what's inside, and and that degree is not going to cover that,
No, there's something else going on. And with that said, it obviously affects our joy, obviously affects our mental health. So how does it affect our mental health, especially when it comes to anxiety, burnout, or even the ability to feel our joy?
Yeah, so it's highly correlated to anxiety. So it's been studied for a lot of people. I think it's like a social media concept. It's been studied in the social sciences for almost 50 years now. And so we
Mhm.
know it's highly correlated to anxiety. It's highly
Mhm.
correlated to depression. It actually has a relationship to PTSD. We also know it has a high correlation to burnout because if you're
Mhm.
overworking, you're going to
Mhm.
clearly get burnt out eventually. And often chronic burnout, not just acute burnout, but chronic, like over long periods of time, you've been burnt out for years. You don't even sort of recognize that as burnout. So it's highly
Yeah.
correlated to a lot of mental health conditions. It is not a diagnosis in and of itself, but it
Yeah.
is also highly correlated to a lot of things that are diagnostic.
Mhm. How do we recognize it's happening? Just like with burnout, I guess we don't realize we're getting burnt out. What are the signs? How do we
I
know?
mean, I think that with imposter syndrome, oftentimes you know because you've been dealing with this sort of chronic sense of insecurity and this idea that I need to be perfect
Mm.
in order to kind of like
Mhm.
be able to be recognized, and then we don't recognize ourselves and often feel like a fraud. So that
Yeah.
language of fraud, I think, is really resonant for people who experience imposter syndrome because they often are calling themselves like that, calling themselves that way.
Yeah.
So they're thinking about themselves as fraudulent, or that they fooled someone, or they were able to kind of convince somebody of something that isn't true about them. So it's that feeling of the hiding of, there's a part of you that's yet to be revealed and often gets revealed in mistakes or like normal human error that happens all the time.
Yeah, and you mentioned PTSD. How's it related to PTSD and trauma?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we see a lot, especially for childhood experiences, particularly, but there's a lot of trauma dynamics at hand in
Mhm.
early childhood. Feelings of neglect, abuse can be part of it, in
Yeah.
the sense that you probably weren't getting a lot of accolades about your successes or accomplishments when you're being
Mhm.
abused, when you're neglected, or when there's like a narcissistic parent that can create a lot of trauma in a home,
Mhm.
codependent dynamics, which are often related to addiction or behaviors like that can
Mhm.
also affect feelings of traumatization. And I will also say, oftentimes in our adult lives, we have workplace trauma that is
Mhm.
very much connected to it too, and this feeling of not being good enough or feeling like you have to put up with workplace dynamics that are incredibly
Yeah.
toxic because you don't deserve any better or you can't find any better. So I do feel like trauma is usually like layered in there in the experience, and is not really recognized as a part of the dynamic.
Yeah. So if you don't mind sharing because you mentioned that you went through imposter syndrome yourself, how did you start to recognize it? I think you said you were in grad school, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was grad school that really kind of introduced the term to me, and then I realized, oh gosh, I've been
Mm.
living with this my whole life. At least it had a name, because you hear a lot in common, like especially social media. It's like don't pathologize people. Frankly, the term is what gave me a sense of like freedom from the idea of my
Nice.
own pathology of myself,
Mhm.
that I was broken, that I was something was wrong with
Mhm.
me. And I think, I sort of realized it then. I recognized it, but I didn't know how to deal with it. I just knew that it was happening. I didn't sort of have a framework for how to get over it. And so I
Mm.
think, when I graduated from my doc program, I was probably in the worst shape of my probably entire adult life. Was
Mm.
incredibly burnt out. I was
Mhm.
feeling like I didn't deserve the
Yeah.
degree. I was having all kinds of like nightmares of like I would get these calls from my alma mater around like donating, and I would always think what they were gonna say is that they were gonna take my degree away because they found some
Oh,
mistake in my
wow.
dissertation. I
Whoa.
I felt that for years.
Whew.
And it really tainted the kind of opportunities that I really went for after I graduated. And
Mm.
I really just didn't reach for the stars for myself. I reached for what felt accessible.
Mm.
And that often was things that I probably shouldn't have chosen for myself. And then I ended up in a job probably 3 years out of my doc program where I had an incredibly toxic boss.
Mm.
He was pretty terrible. Like he was sexually harassing several of us. He
Oh,
was
no.
making us feel like we weren't doing enough. He would humiliate us publicly. We were involved in a team that was in an academic institution teaching faculty how to teach. So it was working on pedagogical strategy,
Mhm.
and which is a hard rule for someone who's coming in as an administrator, because
Yeah.
faculty and academic centers like have like the highest, are in the
Yeah.
highest esteem, and you are not as an administrator. So it's a very difficult authority dynamic, and he would
Yeah.
he would humiliate us publicly, ask us to go get coffee for the faculty member when we were in the middle of teaching or doing something. It was a really painful experience. And then I happened to find out that my coworker was making like $30,000 more than I was. And at the time it was massive because I was only making, I think I was making like 60,000. So it was like, she was almost making like half of what I was making more. And I was really like, it did something to me, like that, where I kind of was like, how is this happening? Did I let this happen? Did I not negotiate? And I started to feel like, I need to have some agency in this process. Like I feel like I need to fight for myself. So I started to fight him around like the pay and that I had found out. And he gave me all these excuses, like he couldn't give me a raise until he gave these other people a raise who had asked first. He told me like, he was going to do it in a couple of weeks, never did it. Was kind of playing games. And I realized at some point he was never going to kind of give me that raise. And then I kind of got a little learned helpless and kind of was like, I don't think there's anything I can do. And I felt like I couldn't get another job. And we were sitting in a staff meeting of all women. We're all an all women senior staff. He was a man. And we were in this meeting. And before the meeting started, there was music playing. And one of the women asked, what's that music that's playing? She's like, where does it come from? And he was like, it's music to soothe the savage breast. And I think in that one moment, I like woke up. I was like, he knows exactly what he's doing. And he thinks we're a bunch of savages and that he is here to tame us or to force us into compliance. And in that moment, I just felt like I saw everything. And I just like went after the meeting. I called my husband and I was like, I need to quit this job. And he's like, I've been telling you for months now, you need to quit this job. And so I cleared out my office that weekend, cleared out my computer that weekend. On the Monday morning, I went to quit the job. And because he was so disordered and problematic in and of himself, he screamed at me, he threatened my career. He cried. It was a very dramatic situation in which the only thing I promised myself was that I was going to quit no matter what, and I was going to leave. And so he tried to threaten me, and that scared me because he said I'd never work in education again. And he was pretty powerful. He was a dean, and he was powerful in the institute, and it was a large institution. And so I got scared, but I was like, I can't go back on myself. And I emptied out my office on purpose because I knew I couldn't go back. I couldn't go back to the office. There was nothing in it. And so I gave him the keys and I walked out, and I ended up having like almost like a fugue dissociative state going home. Like I just was like, what did I just do to myself? And ended up having a panic attack when I got home because I thought like I'd blown my whole life up. And I then, my husband said, I remember him saying on the phone, he's like, you need to start working on the practice. The practice is what you've always wanted. It's what I want for us too.
Good.
Like, just start focusing on that. And what I think was helpful to me was that it was the first time I was dedicating my time and energy into something that I really wanted for myself. And I dug into like making that practice happen. Within 2 weeks, I had another job. The job was paying more than I was making full time in 2 days a week. And I ended up working in another part of that same institution. Because I ended up telling the new boss exactly what had happened to me. And she was a woman and she got it. And she said, it's not going to happen here and you're safe. And that's when it started. Then I started to recover, and started to deal with it.
That's awesome. And that's why I felt like it was like a gender difference, because like you felt more comfortable with her. And you also mentioned in the beginning the financial segregation where somebody was making more than you. And that can feel like an imposter syndrome thing, or just kind of like you could feel restricted, like you're not able to ask about that. So how did you even gain the courage to ask about the salary? Because
I think I was fed up at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, I had been talking to people about what was happening to me. There was another woman, a Black faculty member who I will never forget, and I owe so much to, who was just really encouraging me to leave and that I deserved more. And it was her voice that I think I couldn't go to her and tell her I found out that this happened and not stand up for myself because she was encouraging me so much to stand up for myself. And I think I just had enough feeling of I'm being backed by enough people who care about me that I can do this, even if it turns out badly. And it was hard. It was the first time I'd ever asked for more salary-wise in a situation. But I also was very clear that we were we both had doctorates. We both were about the same age. And she was a white woman, I wasn't. That was the only difference. I was actually carrying one more program than she was.
Yeah.
So to me, it was like black and white. There was no reason why she should make me so much more than me.
Yeah.
And so I think it gave me a power to feel like I could do it. And then I think when he sort of denied me, and then I started to fall back into this feelings of like learned helplessness and just being like, I guess I can't do anything. And then he said that. And then I was like, oh, this is not an accident. Like he knows exactly what he's doing. And then I just was like, well, then I have a choice. I have a choice to either succumb to this knowing he knows exactly what he's doing, or I have a chance to do something different. And
that empowerment is key.
It is key. And to feel like, you know, my husband, who doesn't have imposter syndrome and who has never had imposter syndrome, has said to me, like, you know, if we ever end up needing that guy, we've done something terribly wrong in our careers. We've worked so hard to achieve what we've achieved, you know, like he shouldn't be in our ways. And he's always believed that. And I've always believed there's some way they're going to come for me. Yeah. And he was right. He was totally right. You know,
and that's why it's important to recognize the signs of imposter syndrome, because it holds you back, like you said, and that self-worth is important. The assertiveness is important. You definitely need that. And I know you can't see
community is important.
Oh, yes. Community and support. I know you can't see the comments on Instagram, but somebody said, I remember a time when I had a dream that I didn't earn my degree and I had to go back to school. I dreamt a few times and realized that I was feeling a sense of imposterism. And once I accepted who I was, it stopped happening. And they said, I love that you chose to say no and leave, Dr. Lisa. So
it was one of the best things I ever did for myself. It was scary. It was all scary as get out, but you know, I'm glad I did it.
Oh yeah. So
it
important.
Changed my life.
Oh, well, thank you for that story. Now I feel like, I guess I've had a level of imposter syndrome, but I guess not the true imposter syndrome, because I definitely have had times where, you know, I get nervous before certain things, like if I'm going on TV or doing a workshop or speaking before people, I'm like, oh, wait, why did they ask me to speak? And so I have to remind myself, okay, you have to agree, you know what you're talking about. And, you know, just kind of pretend like I'm doing a one-on-one conversation with a patient, even though there's like 100 people or could be 10, however many. And then as I start to talk, I'm like, oh, I know what I'm talking about. It's weird that you just have to remind yourself almost every day. Like, I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And I think that's the piece that I think the reason why we're reminding ourselves is because we're practicing internalizing it. We're practicing believing that it is true. And I think the more that we practice that, the more we do believe in it, the more it comes more automatically, the faster it comes. It's not that we're never going to feel anxious about, you know, a big moment or a big talk, but the idea that you don't belong there is the one that we have to eradicate, you know.
I always compare it to Beyonce. I'm like, I'm sure she still gets nervous before her concerts.
But she still knows she's Beyonce. So
that's what makes me feel better. Beyonce still gets nervous. I will believe that's true. So,
sure.
What are some practical steps for people who are listening that they can take to challenge those I'm not enough thoughts and start owning their accomplishments with confidence?
Yeah, so I think there's a variety. So in the first book, we talk about all the interventions from social science that have really shown to be very, very valuable to the to moving the needle. One of them that I think that really sticks with a lot of people is dealing with your automatic negative thoughts. So, you know, when we get triggered for imposter syndrome, it can be something like a new job, new assignment, high visible project or high visible opportunity. When we get the trigger, our tendency is either to overwork or self-sabotage. And part of our job is to kind of be able to recognize that a set of thoughts create that motion forward in that behavior. What are those thoughts for you? You know, are those thoughts like, if I just give 100%, it's not going to be good enough, so I have to give 200%? Is the idea like, you know, this is so nerve-wracking, I need to kind of like think it through before I get started? What's happening in you and what do you need to kind of change? So I love this quote by Amit Ray that says, you are not your thoughts, you are the observer of your thoughts. Your job is really to observe those thoughts and think about whether they are helping you kind of move forward or whether they're trapping you in that imposter syndrome cycle. And if they're trapping you, how might you reframe this experience in a way that moves you forward in the way that you want to? You know, so not overworking, not self-sabotaging, kind of engaging in some behavior that moves you one step forward to what you want to do. And so I do think that is really important. I have said this before, community matters
Mm-hmm.
tremendously. And so having people around you that you can share that you do have imposter syndrome, this is why the shaming of imposter syndrome in our society today drives me bananas, because in essence, it puts it right back into the closet. And so you shouldn't be ashamed, even as a woman of color, as a Black woman, as anyone, you shouldn't be ashamed to say you have imposter syndrome. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that. 70% of us have it. And a lot of us are quite
But it's like mental health in general, how we feel ashamed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it makes me so angry when people are being like, stop telling people that the people who've come to me who have been changed in the work have been told, I think you're dealing with imposter syndrome. And nothing has changed their life more than those words, because in essence, then they went and got help. And so I do think it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's nothing to feel bad about. A lot of us experience it. And it's the first step to getting over it. You can never get over it if you don't identify what it is.
Yeah.
You know, so I think talking to people, sharing the real experiences, even if they're embarrassing. It was terribly embarrassing to tell this colleague who was a professor what I was feeling inside. But she just listened to me, and she heard me, and she validated the fact that I could do other things, big things that were just waiting for me. And so I do think, like, you know, I've rarely been shamed for sharing that I have imposter syndrome. I think in this modern day society, you might get shamed, you know, saying it because of what people are
I
saying.
didn't realize that.
Yeah, but I don't think you should be. And if someone shames you,
No.
they're not the right person to be in your community around this. So that's really important. Self-care is incredibly important, because we're so bad at taking care of ourselves, and we always come last, and we don't take care of ourselves when we feel like we have extra time. And that is also eroding our sense of self, our sense of well-being, all the things we need to overcome it. What else do we talk about? We also talk about common roles people get into with imposter syndrome. So being the superhero, or being the person who never makes a mistake, very perfectionistic. So really kind of recognizing that to be whole in your work, no matter what it is to be human in that work. To be able to make mistakes, to kind of really have had enough, to have boundaries, like those things we have to work on. But I think, you know, leaving that behind was tremendously helpful for me.
Oh, that's good. So reframing your thoughts, community, self-care, getting rid of that perfectionism. And it's not shocking that reframing your thoughts is a part of this, because imposter syndrome is in your head, you know, just like a lot of all these other things, the overthinking or thought traps that we have with depression. So it completely makes sense. And it's basically cognitive behavioral therapy that you're talking about.
A lot of it is, it's actually kind of like a quite eclectic. I think it's a little bit of narrative therapy. It's a little bit of family therapy. It's a little CBT. It's a little psychodynamic. The interventions have been quite wide ranging and across the board that have been very effective in dealing with, which I kind of find pretty amazing too. I really love that it's a variety of things, because it kind of, for me as a clinician, makes me feel like all the ways that we practice this work are valuable.
For sure, for sure. And we need to celebrate our wins. So, you know, whether they're big or small, how can that help us reclaim our joy and sense of worth when it comes to imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an important piece of all of this, which is like, when you have an accomplishment, when you have a win, how are you taking it in and internalizing it? Are you just brushing it off and moving to the next thing? Are you finding time to celebrate that moment? I mean, I see with my clients all the time, they get a promotion, they get something big, and they just are moving on to the next thing. And they're not taking a moment to celebrate and like really be proud of what they've done to accomplish this moment, and be able to kind of articulate that even just to themselves. Like, I worked hard to get here, and this is what I did, and these are the things I put together in order to get to this spot. It's not magic. It's not luck. It's not someone bestowing this on you. It's what you did to get there that matters. So I think that becomes really important when you're acknowledging that. It doesn't mean you're prideful and not humble. You can be humble and celebrate yourself simultaneously.
And that's why it's good for us to celebrate each other. Because I know when somebody says, I got this gig or I got that degree, I'm like, yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, exactly. I love to celebrate other people. It's like such a good feeling to kind of celebrate with people.
Yeah, let your light shine, because people like whatever that poem, you shrink back and, you know, just so other people won't feel bad. But it's like, I feel like that encourages the imposter syndrome.
Yes, completely. And that it's so important, not only to be able to celebrate you, but to celebrate others. And you realize how fun it is actually to get to celebrate other people, that people want to celebrate with you.
Exactly. So tell us about your books and where we can find them.
So the first one's called Own Your Greatness. They're all workbooks, except for the last one, the one on kids. I really wanted to give people an opportunity to have a place where they could actually do the work. Granted, like, you're probably going to have to add other pages or work, you know, like kind of have a notebook, because there is a lot to say. But it's really about those interventions I talked about, the 9 interventions that help people overcome imposter syndrome. And we've done some preliminary research on the book and have been able to show that doing the book reduces imposter syndrome by 30%. And so we have like, you take this test in the beginning, you take it at the end, and you can see the difference in your work. So it's work worth doing. And that's always important to us. We're always big believers in that. We don't want to waste people's time. We want them to actually achieve things and move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And the second book is also a workbook. It's really about thinking about, as you can see, I was in a very toxic work environment. A lot of us get into toxic work environments. And it's really helping us to evaluate what's toxic in that work environment that's reinforcing the imposter syndrome. And how do you evaluate a boss or like, you know, an environment or a company to make sure that this is one you want to belong to, that can actually help you grow and you know, and develop as the professional you want to develop. And there's a lot of things we talk about in there about also being a good leader. How do you be a leader who doesn't necessarily reinforce imposter syndrome? So it's all about leadership, organization, culture. And then the last book is about, which is Your Child's Greatness, which is about helping parents to really think, because so much of this starts in childhood, helping them to think and rethink how they work with their children around accomplishments, successes, failures, strengths, weaknesses, things like that, and how to help them really have a good sense of self as a human being and not as a perfect person.
And that's an actual book, not a workbook?
That's actually a book. Yeah, that doesn't have a workbook style to it. 1 and 2 do, but the third is just a regular book. Yeah.
Nice. Well, we want everyone to get the book, but are there at least 2 tips about your child's greatness? Because that's important. Like, how can you throw them up to not be insecure?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we say, number one, and it can't be surprising as a psychologist, is look at your own ish first. Like, make sure that you're doing your own work, because accidentally you can repeat cycles very easily around kind of accomplishment, success, if you don't look at your own hurts and your own things that you haven't worked through. So that's a really big component for us. But also too, we're talking a lot in that book around performance anxiety for children and how to help them. You know, we have 2 teenagers, and so much of their lives are so performance based on test taking and achievement. And I mean, I went to college, I went to grad school, I did all these things, but it feels like the stakes feel super high and very intense in a way, even it wasn't for me. And so I do feel like really helping them to have a good sense of self throughout all of this kind of performance evaluation so early on is really important. And to not necessarily, you know, yes, grades are important to get into college, but to not define yourself in those ways, those really narrow ways about how we're smart or not smart or capable or not capable. So I think that's really big. And then I think the third piece that I think would be the third thing that I'm most passionate about is really making sure that your kids are in the best learning environments for them. And so I do think, like, I'm a big believer in like having kids evaluated, like when you notice something's going on, early intervention for things like ADHD, any kind of neurodivergence can change a kid's life, and to not be afraid of this stigma of like diagnosis, but that the diagnosis can sometimes help your kid understand what's going on and how to intervene on it in ways that are just incredibly important to success. So I think like that's been really very important to me.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, as you were talking, I was thinking about, because sometimes, like, do you ever speak with moms about mommy imposter syndrome? Because I know you said you had 2 teenagers. I have 3 boys. They are 2, 5, and 14. And sometimes you feel like, I'm not enough of a mom, or I'm not a good mom, or I'm an imposter as a mom. Why am I? Do you ever work with moms?
Yeah, totally. I work with moms all the time. Most of my practice is largely women. I still see men, but they're largely women. And I do think like a lot of women are often in that judging game about like what is good enough. And I think I'm often working with my clients, especially who are moms, to really be able to appreciate the humanity in parenting, because I don't think there's a lot of leeway for humanity in parenting, like making mistakes, stepping on something you really wish you hadn't, you know, like, and really just being able to just be okay with the fact that you're going to have to apologize to your kids sometimes, you're going to misstep, you're going to do things that you wish you hadn't, but like need to take accountability for. And I think it's really good for your kids to see you in these flawed human ways growing up, because one, I think that when they recognize that, and as an adult, it's not so stark, and that you're human. And then also too, I think it teaches them how to make mistakes in ways that are relationally like healing in the sense that you can make a mistake and still love someone. You can step in it and still feel like, you can trust me. Like it enters in a sense of complexity that I think is happening anyway, but at least we're acknowledging it that, we mess up too. So I think I'm really about the humanity and compassion in parenting. I try to give it to myself a lot. It's not easy. It just isn't easy raising kids, period, but definitely not today. And like, really having compassion for yourself, I think is critical. And also challenging yourself to grow and to be more than what you thought you could be. And so I think that's also part of it, is like, I don't also rest on my laurels. I'm always like trying to challenge myself to step up in ways that are hard as a parent or as an adult, period.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but that's
It's
why we
a
have
lot
to
of work.
be intentional about all this and the self-awareness and doing the work and journaling, and that's why it's journey.
Taking care of ourselves. Yeah. Modeling it. Yeah.
For sure, you have to do that. So if somebody wanted you as their coach, how would they do that? Is that where your website comes in?
Yeah. So they just sign up for a consultation, and we talk through whether or not I'm a good fit, and whether or not they feel like this is what they're looking to work on. And so, so that would be one of the ways that they could do that.
Awesome. And is this where they can find your workbooks, or those?
They're on all major booksellers, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all of those. And then we also have courses. So if you don't want to coach, but you want to go through the book with a course and videos and workbooks and things like that, we have courses. And those are pretty self do it yourself kind of things you can do on your own pace and pretty affordable. So
awesome. Well, definitely appreciate you. You can also find you at Dr. Orbé-Austin on Instagram and other platforms. But I do ask all of my guests, how has your personal journey to joy been?
Well, it's been complicated. It's been a long road, I think, as you could hear. Like, it's been a long road, but I think that I have been able to find joy through, I think, really recognizing the things that matter to me and are meaningful to me, and like finding joy no matter what is going on circumstantially. I think that has been really hard, but I think has really been important. Like, no matter what the external things showing up saying you're doing a good job are, I need to feel joy no matter what. So.
For sure. I need to feel joy no matter what.
No matter what.
I mean, joy is resistance. I've said that multiple times.
I believe that.
It's just like pushing against the grain, and it takes work. Just like therapy.
Pushing against the system. Yes. All of it. Yes. It's an act. I so often say it's a revolutionary act.
Exactly.
To kind of lean into your joy.
You're also pushing against your own thoughts here, because your own thoughts are telling you you're an imposter. They're not true.
Yep. But how scary, right? If your own thoughts are telling you the not truth, like, it is really scary. So I really do honor the fact that it's not an easy road, but it's a road worth pursuing.
Yeah, because a lot of times we're looking for somebody else to validate the negative thoughts. So when that external thing happens, you're like, oh, that's right. See, I don't belong here. And it's like, but if you'd already told yourself you belonged here, that external thing may not have bothered you at all.
Yeah, completely. It would have been nothing. It would have been a blip.
Exactly. So it's important for you to do your own work and just, whatever you can control that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on Journey to Joy Live. I really appreciate you, Dr. Lisa.
Thank you for having me. It was a joy. Okay. It really was.
Of course. Well, have a great evening.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye. This has been an Enjoy Life production. If you're in a crisis, don't hesitate. Call, text, or chat 988 for immediate support. Please note, this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional treatment. If you're looking for therapy or medication management through Enjoy Life, visit www.drenjoylife.com to request a consultation. I'm licensed in 12 states. I accept Aetna in Georgia, Florida, and Virginia. Be sure to grab your copy of the Enjoy Note to help you on your wellness journey. Also check out Inspire Joy for the wife, mom, boss to help you balance it all without losing yourself. Better yet, get the full Joy bundle for just $45. Remember, Journey to Joy Live is every Thursday at 7 p.m. Thank you for joining me, and until next time, may you continue to transform stress into joy.